Hey y'all, I'm the captain, and this is Sailing on the Spectrum, where I talk about the challenges growing up with autism spectrum disorder. Welcome aboard. I'm wearing blue today. It is Autism Awareness Month. I only found out yesterday, but hey, at least I am joining in on the fun now. So I dug this out of the back of the drawer, figured, you know what, if I'm going to be doing a video, if I'm going to represent, might as well look the part. I'm wearing blue. I guess blue is the color you wear for showing support for autism and those on the spectrum. And today's video theme is going to be the subject of self-love when you're on the spectrum. Seems like kind of a broad category, but basically I know there's a lot of I think good and healthy memes and videos and I guess other things out there, that talk about loving yourself, finding and nurturing your inner self. I think a lot of those, all those are pretty healthy, and a lot of them are needed. I will tell you this. I know, especially for people who are on the spectrum, like myself, I think an argument can be made that we may be in need of it even to a greater degree than many of the other, as we would say, neurotypical population, those who aren't on the spectrum. But that's not to say not everybody else needs it. It's important to have a healthy self-image and a healthy self-love, especially if you want to be able to radiate and be the person you need to be to those around you. I know that especially as a husband and a daddy. And I think I've become more aware of it and more aware of the urgency of it for myself. Because I'm a husband and a daddy, it's not that I didn't need to before that. But I'll tell you, for those of us on the spectrum, that can be a real challenge. Self-love is something that just doesn't seem very natural for us, because when you grow up feeling like you're in an environment that makes you feel alien, just where you feel like things just don't hit you the way that they do everybody else, and everybody else seems to move a lot smoother and at a greater, and accept and deal with things at a greater, as it were, a greater rate or a greater efficiency than maybe you do, and processes things more easily and gets on in life more easily. It just feels like, you're in an alien environment. And obviously that can make you feel very much like somehow the difficulties you have, or the fact that you don't step up your game with your life and do things as easily as others do, is somehow your fault. It can begin when you are just a child. For me, a lot of the real feelings about myself were realized when I was a child, especially going to school with other kids, feeling like the environment and the sensory input that was around me overwhelmed me, that I couldn't always make everybody happy because I didn't, just fall in line. I didn't, it wasn't because I was a troublemaker. It wasn't because I was out there to disobey or to make or to not respect the others or anything like that. A lot of times if you're on the spectrum, you're the recipient of a lot of disrespect. Not necessarily from adults. Obviously, you probably feel a lot more intimidated, I guess, maybe especially by, certain people or certain things, when you're on the spectrum, because sensory input levels, and sometimes, especially from authority figures, can be a lot more overwhelming. Whereas maybe with others on the spectrum, I don't know, maybe they just are so impervious to it, they don't, that's what gives them problems. They just are not. But at any rate, you don't get taken as someone who really fits in. And you just are aware of that from the start. And having that, follow you around like it did for me all those years growing up, it just made it harder to really accept myself and feel like I was worthy of respect. And so it's one of those things that can bring a real, I guess, handicap in some ways when you're trying to formulate relationships, and certainly when you're trying to formulate a romance, uh, and but just in general, your whole life, everything, it bleeds into everything in your life. Your job, what you're going to do for a job, if you can keep a job, if you can do a job, if you can work, if you can live on your own, if you can meet responsibilities, you feel very unworthy, and therefore those responsibilities, those relationships are very hard to meet, to be able to give, to reciprocate and do what you need to do to be who you can, the best version of yourself for others around you. And it's probably something that I still to this day, a bug that I have to work out in my brain, where I need to understand that it's not wrong, that it's not something to be ashamed of, to want to and to have the self-love, the self-respect, the self-appreciation that is not only what I could use this, what you deserve. It's not in the sense that you deserve it in the sense that you earned it. It's just because you are you. You're important. You're a person, and you're the only one on the planet who can be you. Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the television show that was so very nicely documented in the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor that came out a couple of years ago. Fred Rogers did that children's program on PBS all those years. He really was instrumental in helping a lot of kids, appreciate themselves as they needed to. Obviously, I wasn't able to absorb it in the same sense as I guess maybe neurotypical kids were back in those days, because I'm talking about a generation ago when I would have been a kid, and obviously even those who are older than me would have seen him on TV. But he said, in a way, you've already won in this world because you're the only one who can be you. It's important to understand that you've already won in many ways, because if you feel like you need to always compete and be somehow trying to climb the ladder just to stay in the pack with everything and everybody else, especially in today's climate where everything's moving a mile a minute, and information in general and life in general it seems to just be hitting everybody at such a rapid pace. It can feel very hard, especially for somebody who has a developmental challenge like autism spectrum disorder, to feel like they are winning. And I have to understand, though, and I think that especially in recent, I guess, years, maybe even in recent months, even in spite of the pandemic and all the challenges that have gone on, even in just my own life, I guess in some ways, it just really has made it so much better, because I've been able to understand that, hey, it's okay to love yourself enough, to take care of yourself enough, and to not need to always, on first instinct, feel like I need to apologize for myself whenever something comes up with somebody else, either in my house or elsewhere. That's just made such a difference, and is making such a difference. It's not something I need to feel like I'll ever arrive at that perfection, or nirvana, as it were. You just understand that, hey, even though you're not perfect, if you love yourself enough and you understand that you're enough, just the fact that you are who you are is enough, then you don't need to go out and prove yourself, and you don't need to do things and turn yourself into an animal and pull your hair out all the time just to try to see if you can please anybody or impress anybody. That was something that it was so hard for me to not do, especially when I was trying to make it in new environments, like when I started high school, or when I started college, or after college. And even when I got, married, it was thankfully something that I've slowly been able to conquer. Even though I think everybody in their own way has to conquer that. The ability to just not beat yourself up. And I can just think of the milestones I've achieved. I've been able to, I just paid off a car that I bought from a dealership 2 years ago. I just got pre-approved for a house, even though we even looked at a house, and even though our offer wasn't accepted, hey, I'm able to say that I'm doing things that are firsts for me, and that are so things that not everybody can say they do, and especially people on the spectrum, And it's not like I need to say those things or tell you those things to impress you. I'm saying, hey, those are things I can pat myself on the back for and know that it means that I'm moving in a good direction, that I'm in a good place, that I'm enough. I mean, there's a very good description I read on one website. One Aspergian or person on the spectrum said, during my worst days, it used to feel like I was trespassing on the rest of the world's property just by being alive. That's a very sobering statement, and it's starkly real to things that I felt in the past, and it's very real for a lot of people on the spectrum. And if you read that statement and to hear it said out loud, it can almost scare you, because it can actually make you appreciate and realize with great somberness and why there's a lot of difficulties with self-injury and even suicide. But not even just that, but just mental issues, anxiety and depression, those residual issues that I have another video about in another episode of Sailing on the Spectrum about anxiety and depression. But that quote I just read, trespassing on the rest of the world's property just by being alive. That's how it feels. That's how it felt a lot of the time in a lot of places. That's just so descriptive, and it seems to nail the head on the hammer. But I'll tell you this, I want to make sure that you know that even though I'm not a professional, even though I don't have some sort of a certification in this field, being someone who is on the spectrum and has lived in that space and has embodied it himself, I do feel qualified to simply impart to you whatever wisdom or input or I can, to help you know that there are people who understand and people who are working to overcome, as I am working to overcome. I think we all are, in a way. That's just part of life. But the way I work to overcome, to simply say that, hey, I can be me, and it's good enough, and I've done what I have. I have what I have who I have, and I hope that helps. Especially, I figured I'd seize on the moment, because this is Autism Awareness Month. I want to give you another quote. An excellent way to measure the strength of our society is to take note of how we care for the well-being of those who are vulnerable, including their self-esteem. Part of your well-being is self-esteem. It's not just saying, here's a place to live, here's a job, now go and be an adult. I mean, good grief, that's not what people who are caring for those who are on the spectrum should just be all about. I don't think that's all they are all about. I really believe, though, that a real root of it is just helping people on the spectrum in whatever ways, in whatever pathways can be done, to help them to understand that their self-love is not something they need to go out of their way to do, that they know that they can have it and believe it, and that they can recognize those who love them for others who love them for who they are. I'm so glad that I've been able to do that. Even during my times when I was my loneliest, I did unashamedly do things like I went and exercised, I worked out, went to the gym. I'd watched things that made me laugh. I didn't worry about, what others, were watching. I just watched things that made me laugh, even if it were cartoons, I took naps. I still do that. I treat myself to a favorite food or dessert every so often. I just, used to I mean, it's just those kinds of little things that you should never be ashamed of doing, even if they don't seem like things that people ordinarily do. You don't have to apologize for them. And I could really go on and on about more specifics, but I just want to leave you again by saying, if you're somebody who's on the spectrum who struggles with it, or even if you have some other difficulty, some who have ADHD, or some who have something else that is perhaps doesn't, some sort of a challenge, you need to all remember Mr. Rogers' quote: "You've already won in this world because you're the only one who can be you." I'm thankful for those who say they love me because I'm me. Even my wife, she said, "I love the way your mind works. That tells you how genuine her love is." And I accept it, and I got to believe it, because when I don't, that's when I become unable to receive love, and actually unable to give it back the way I need to. And I want to give it to her, my wife, and give my little girl the love and acceptance she deserves. And when she sees me doing that for myself, it's going to help her do it for herself a lot better. But even if you're not married, even if you don't have kids, just know that you're enough. You'll be able to know how you understand yourself better, and you'll be able to understand those who love you better, and you'll be able to see it and be drawn to it. So let's continue our journey on the spectrum, especially this month on Autism Awareness Month. I'll put links in the description. I'll try to find the links to the quotes I gave you. And please, thank you so much for joining. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you on our next voyage.